Okay. We're live.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Apex Magazine Snap Judgement number 4. My name is Alyson Grauer. I am your host and
Okay.
narrator today, and very happy to be here. I have been serving for the last several months as the Apex
We're
Magazine
live.
podcast producer, so you might recognize me from that. I've had some short stories published here and there myself as well. So I am very keenly interested in today's feedback as a writer and as a host and narrator. For those of you who are joining us who are not familiar with Snap Judgment, I have been serving for the last several months. Apex Magazine subscribers Apex Magazine podcast producer were invited to submit the first 250 words or so of a short story or of a novel. These entries are made anonymous, very keenly and ordered at random. A few minutes prior to the start of this live stream, our judges were sent the document containing all of the entries so that they can read along with the narration as I give it. I will be reading each entry aloud, one at a time, until they are completed or until all 3 editors have raised their hand. Each editor is going to raise their hand at whatever point in that entry that they would stop reading as an editor working on their slush pile. Then our judges will provide some feedback on why they raised their hand at that point, what kind of impact the story has on them so far, and what they might recommend to improve that story's chances at getting further in the submission process. We have several submissions in the lineup today, and we are going to try to get through as many as possible, but if we do not get to yours, we apologize in advance, and we thank you for your patience. At this time, I would like to do a quick sidebar and invite everyone to check out the current Apex Magazine Kickstarter for 2023. It just launched very recently. Funding the Kickstarter is going to secure the first 3 issues of Apex Magazine for next year. We have a list of wonderful backer rewards and add-ons for you this year, including discounted subscriptions, bundles, swag, and a Kickstarter exclusive speculative fiction cocktail book called Strange Libations. It's going to be given free to every single backer. So go ahead and check that out. I believe there will be a link in the chat. But at any rate, we hope that if you're able to back that Kickstarter for us, we look forward to having you join us there. And we thank you for tuning in today. And now I would like to introduce our panel of judges. Our esteemed guest panelist today for Snap Judgement number 4 is Sheree Renée Thomas, editor of the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction, co-editor of the anthologies Trouble the Waters and Africa Risen. She is the author of the collection 9 Bar Blues, Stories from an Ancient Future, which is so good, and the new Marvel novel, Black Panther, Panther's Rage. Sheree, welcome.
Thank you. Hi.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
We also have Lesley Conner, Apex Magazine's co-editor-in-chief and the author of the historical dark fantasy novel, The Weight of Chains, and co-editor of Do Not Go Quietly, Stories of the Resistance. Lesley is somewhat with us. She is here in spirit and personally, but she is currently off camera, I believe, but she is tuned in. Thank you for being here, Lesley. And then last, but certainly not least, is the man with the titanium jaw, co-editor-in-chief of Apex Magazine and owner of Apex Publications, Jason Sizemore. He's a former Hugo and Stoker Award finalist and author of For Exposure, The Life and Times of a Small Press Publisher. Jason, thank you as always for joining us as well. Our panelists are all here for one reason. They're here to help writers claw their way out of the slush pile. So today, we hope that insight and recommendations are helpful and critiques are positive and entertaining for everybody who is watching. I think we just lost Jason, but hopefully he...
Can you hear me?
I can hear you briefly, Lesley, yes.
Okay, because...
And I know Lesley is cutting in and out as well a little bit. Okay, it looks like Jason is having some tech difficulties. Lesley is going to hop out and hop back in. It's you know what, folks, we're live and it's fine. We're all gonna figure it out. Sheree, how are you? How's stuff?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for joining us. We've been very excited at the prospect of having you do this for a little while now. So we're super excited you could make it.
Thank you.
All right, looks like Lesley's hopping back on. Looks like Jason's hopping back on. It's an exciting time.
This may be the Allie and Sheree show.
Listen, what did I say just a few minutes ago? I will stall forever if you want me to. There's Jason. Okay. He's got headphones now. Can't hear him yet, but if he can hear us, he'll maybe nod his head. No, not yet. Okay. Jason is typing.
He's shaking his head.
He's
This
shaking
does
his
not
head.
Look good.
Okay.
Oh man, the stress of a live event.
Truly. Okay, it says he's causing some feedback, it sounds like, when he turns on his audio. Do we want to attempt to forge ahead as he troubleshoots, or should we hold for tech?
Sheree, I'm open to whatever works best for you. I'm fine to forge ahead as long as you all can hear me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Let's
I can hear
forge
you.
ahead. Can Jason go into the chat and type out comments or anything? Maybe we can do the chat.
Yes, if Jason can use the Zoom chat.
I think that is maybe
He's given us the Jean-Luc Picard make it so gesture. So I think we're going to go ahead.
Make it so.
All right. We're going to get started here with our first entry. Remember that these entries have been anonymized and they have been randomized. So they're not in any particular order. We're just going to go ahead and see how far we get. And remember, Lesley and Sheree and Jason, if you can hear us, go ahead and raise your hand when you're ready to stop the entry and give feedback. Okay.
Was it like this hand or like actual hand?
Your actual hand is fine.
Okay.
I can see you. That's a good question.
Let me see if I can lower this.
Yeah. All right. So our first entry, the title is Keeping Culture in the Vast. Rod stood in the galley kitchen surrounded by skeletons. Bats and papier-mâché pumpkins littered the table too, but the hollow bones were by far his favorite. One look at the clock positioned just left of the comm told him he was very short on time. Though he'd lived his entire life on station, Rod upheld the comforts and traditions of his terra-walking ancestors. When the parents and grandparents of those on ship left Earth, they knew they would never come back. With no destination in mind but away from their decimated rock, the ship floated through the vast in search of a new home. His son sat in the corner, hunched over a spindly body. Anu, is the spider ready? Soon, Pop. Rod picked up the large stainless steel bowl and tempered the chocolate with watery, white liquid that passed for milk, as no one on board had eaten actual dairy. The first botanists had brought cacao plants on ship when the crew said goodbye to the barren soil, packed up their seeds, and headed for the stars. To have them still growing happily on greenhouse level was a small miracle. Once the surface of the chocolate was smooth and reflective, Rod picked up a ladle and carefully filled each mold. He had 5 trays total: cats, bats, pumpkins, ghosts, and his favorite, skulls. He was concentrating on not wasting a drop and barely heard the crackle of the comm. Off to an interesting start. We made it through that whole first entry with no hands raised. Judges, who would like to go first?
I'll just say that this is a story, though I didn't raise my hand, it's a story I would have skimmed to see what was at stake.
Sure.
I felt like it was a little leisurely opening. And I guess the thing that made it slightly fresh or original is like the reference to like skulls and Halloween stuff. So it's some kind of celebration or something happening. but opening with people in space and they haven't, people have been gone for a long time. That's very, 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 very familiar. So, and I literally get hundreds of those. So you want to start off the story with a sense of what's going to make this tale different and what's going to make me really want to keep reading on to the end of the story. So I was getting antsy. I will say that before the crackly calm, and hopefully it's not the captain, tapping in to tell them something, move it along. So, but, yeah.
No, that's great.
I
Lesley?
agree. Yeah, I agree, Sheree. Like, I felt myself kind of wanting to skim to find out, like, okay, well, what is this story actually about? Because it almost felt like you had two mashups of two different types of stories coming together. The generation ship story that we have read so many times, and then like this folksy horror vibe of like, ooh, it's Halloween. Like, a lot of stories start that way too. This could go somewhere super interesting. But I agree with Sheree, but I was just to the point where I'm going, okay, well, what is at stake here? Like, what is the point of this story going to be? Because right now it's a sort of interesting opening, because I don't know that I've read a generation ship story where they're celebrating old holiday traditions, but at the same time, is that going to be enough to hold my interest? And to, like, it needs to be more than just that.
Yeah, because it's like, why do we care? Like, why do we care? So they're celebrating Halloween or whatever it is. What makes this occasion or this time important? Why are you telling us this story now?
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree with you that it was like I was willing to keep reading, but I would have been skimming ahead going, okay, so what else are you going to give me? Like, what are you giving me that's going to make me want this story?
That's interesting. So it's kind of sounding like both of you are coming at it from a perspective of it's not just like the where and the when of it. It's also like why this, why now, right? That there's got to be a little bit something more right out the gate, or you're not going to want to keep reading.
And for me, that's what short stories are about. I'm telling you this story today of all days, because this is the day when something significant happens, or when the character goes through a change, or the world that I'm introducing you to has a significant moment that leaves it change in some kind of way, So if you don't give me that, it doesn't stay with me. It doesn't stay with me as a reader. Yeah.
Got it.
And it's not a novel, so we're not going to give you all day.
You don't have to time. Yeah. Got it. Jason, did you want to try to chime in? Jason? It's like he's still...
No. Okay.
Okay. Get it. Can't hear you, Jason. Yeah.
Oh, it's connecting now.
Oh.
Can you hear me now?
Yay!
Yay.
I swear to God, it did nothing different. It's the same button.
Listen, we write sci-fi, but we do live it also sometimes.
Yeah.
Did you want to weigh in on that one, Jason?
Are you guys hearing the echo?
No.
No.
That's so weird. It's echoing for me.
Mm.
No, I can't weigh in on this one, though.
Okay.
I was busy monkeying with settings and stuff.
All right. Let's move on to the next one and see if we can continue to solve Jason's problem in the background, because it does look like none of us are hearing the echo, which is good. but we do need Jason to not have an echo as well.
Yeah.
So light your incense and send up those sacrifices so that Jason can get back on the stream. All right, so our next entry is called The Whispering Light. The deceptive light of the summer twilight made Myrto feel like she had a little more time, and for a brief moment the sense of despair that had shrunk her heart since the end of the spring disappeared. The scratched moon at Agina, small and bloody, still hadn't appeared, but she could see through the branches of the salt pines that her older sister Dana was already high above the horizon, her generous, milky disk starting to glow a little more at each passing moment. But the sun is still up, and today isn't over, not yet. She knew that she was fooling herself, but just for that night she would permit herself to feel that way. Soon the day of the Laying Moons festival would come, and she would need to brace herself for her wedding. Oi! Where are you going with the crates, girl? Myrto had been so distracted that she had barely noticed that they were already home, and that she was almost stepping inside with the crab crates still tied to her back. Her father didn't seem amused. Do you want your mother screaming at me even before I enter this damn house? He said, while she took the empty crates from her back and stacked them outside the mud hut. At least I won't hear her yelling at me once I'm married, Myrto pondered, but she wouldn't dare to say such a thing to her father, or he himself would yell at her. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Not the clap. Oh, I don't know what I'm doing.
So did we had Lesley raise a hand and I didn't see it. I apologize. Sheree,
yeah, Lesley raised their hand and then I tapped in later.
Okay. All right. Yeah. All right.
I need other hands.
Let's hear some feedback on The Whispering Light.
Okay, so it does at the top of our submission, it does say that this is a novel.
It does, yes. I apologize. I didn't specify that.
Oh, that's fine. It's just, I felt like that first paragraph was so jam-packed with descriptions. Like we're getting the scratched moon, it's small and bloody, you know, the salt pines, the milky disc starting to glow. And I just was like, I felt like all of these descriptions are kind of like whipping past me at high speed before I really had a sense of like, okay, well, where are we? Because when it goes to the point where she's like, oh, she's already at the house, I'm like, I thought we were standing outside looking at something, but obviously we're moving, and I had no indication of that until her dad yelling at her about the crab pots, I think, or the crates. And I just was like, okay, you're throwing so many descriptions of this world at the reader that seem to be... I feel like we're obviously not on Earth, but so many descriptions are coming in that first paragraph that it's kind of disorienting. Like I'd like to, you need a sense of place, yes, but I would have rather, instead of it feeling like she's standing and looking and describing all of this stuff that doesn't make sense to the reader yet, because we don't know what type of world this is yet. And it was just a little bit overwhelming. And that to then be thrown into the conversation with the father and the wedding and how she doesn't have to listen to them after she gets married, it just felt like I didn't have a strong enough sense of like where we were before they started throwing so many descriptions in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Sheree?
Yeah, I listened to it a little bit longer as I was trying to make my mind up what was happening. And for me, I didn't know where we were. Salt Pines and the Scratch Moon and the names, Myrtle and Dana, it just seemed like it was pulling from multiple cultures. And so I wasn't even sure if I was off Earth or on Earth. in some, alternate, community or what have you. I was hoping it might be some kind of folk horror story, but then the dialogue came in and the dialogue didn't grab me. So I actually would have tapped out probably pretty early in that. And then we don't, F&SF, we don't publish novels. We publish novellas and novelettes. So that might have got dismissed from off the jump on the word count. I don't know what the full submission would have been. Yeah.
So for this one, sort of the consensus I'm seeing is the time and place are not specific enough, quickly enough to really bring the reader into the moment that's happening.
Yeah, I felt like to get, obviously you don't want to like info dump right at the beginning, giving us this whole like backstory of the world or anything.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's like, rather than giving us a sense of place, we got just a bunch of descriptions that without that sense of place just felt very disorienting. And I agree, when the dialogue came in, I'm like, okay, wait, like I felt like I was in one place and then the dialogue whipped me around to a different place. And I'm like, okay, I just need maybe a little bit more of what the setting is before you start throwing in all of this description, and especially about like the ceremony and, her older sister's already high above the horizon. And so I felt like we're trying to get a lot of information in very quickly, but without enough context for the reader to understand what those details actually mean. Which a few details that you're like, ooh, I don't know exactly what that means, that in a novel will then be later explained, is fine. But I just felt like in that first paragraph, there was just so much that I did not have the context for. And it was just very, like, I would rework that first paragraph to really anchor your reader in the place and the character, rather than throwing in a whole bunch of, like, descriptors, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, that definitely makes sense. I for one, want to know who Murdo is before I know anything else, having read the entry.
I think for short story writers, it's so interesting because you're always, the thing you question is, where do you begin the story? Where do you begin to tell once you figure out the whole arc, right? And I find that for the stories that I'm passing on, if I choose to give individual feedback, and by the way, don't write me and ask me to do that. That just annoys me. Because if I wanted to give you feedback, I would have done it in the first place. I didn't forget. The thing about it is that I'm passing because the story doesn't get us close to the heart of the story. Like begin us as close as you can to the heart of the story, right? So we know that there are going to be relationships that extend beyond our reading of it, and there's things that happen before, but get us as close to that catalyst as possible, and then you can weave in the emotional parts, the resonance, the character development, the things that make us hold on to the story and want to keep reading, the things that make us care about your characters. So if there's something that we could feel sympathetic about, the character, maybe let us know that a little early on so that we're invested in what happens. But it's in a way, it's like, how do you create mystery without it being false mystery? How do you introduce us to the story without leaving so much on, so much for us to find out on page 11? I might not get to page 11. I might be trying to check out your story in page 1 or 2, so that opening is it's really tough sometimes to really hook readers, just the regular readers in a bookstore even. So, just try to be clear, try to have strong prose and make us care about the characters and understand, get a sense of what's at stake. And I knew that there's some kind of wedding going to be happening. So I don't know what's up with the wedding. But do I care? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love the way you said that, Sheree, that with a short story especially, get us as close as you can to the heart of the story as fast as you can, because that makes a lot of sense. The way you said that makes a lot of sense. All right, we're going to move on to the next one, and I think Jason has given me the go-ahead to move on to the third entry, and we're still troubleshooting on his end, but we might be good. So we're going to take the next entry, and I'm going to most of these I think have a genre listed as well, and whether or not they're a novel. So I will be letting you know that as well from now on. This is a fantasy. It doesn't say whether it's a short story or a novel, so I'm going to assume it's a short story. So it's a fantasy short story titled The Silver City. The trade bells.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yep, I can hear you, Jason.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a delay. I'm not sure. But yeah, so we'll go into the third entry, The Silver City. The trade bells rang hope on Sunday. The sound echoed off the barricade of mountains that surrounded Estralla and shook the wayward cabins that lined the village's winding streets. Today, smithies would wager for dented metal scraps and merchants would trade gains for anything that hadn't rotted through. Today, Neva had to be ready. She left her perch on the lower cliffs, where she had spent the early hours watching figures emerge from their sooty homes, piling wagons with hoarded rations and any goods worth their weight in food more than function. The brassy din of the bells clanged through her bones as she walked to the town center known as Devlin's Row. Within the hour, it would be bustling with chance and change, the clink of coin passing hands, and the cracked-tooth grin of vendors selling raw deals. Trade day means recalibration. Neva recited the merchants' calls like broken hymns in her head. A settling of the scales, they'd said, food in the hands of the masses, and a chance for the old to be made new again. It was all a lie, of course. Some line from long ago that had seeped into the ethos of Estralla after it found itself trapped in the confines of the valley. Plenty would argue it was a necessary lie, the spinning of the wheel, recycling of the scarce in a land governed by its limits. But she hated it all the same.
I enjoyed that.
Yeah, I did
enjoyed
too.
that. I thought the prose was very strong. I thought the setting was beautiful description of the setting. I could see things. I felt like I became the character. So when your descriptions are really well done, I am in that world and I'm doing the action of whoever the protagonist is. So I felt like I was perched. I was watching this action. I was very curious about what's the significance of it. But I was interested enough to keep reading. Some of the lines that, some of the language that sang out to me is like the sound like broken hymns and things like that. Really lovely description. And it just kind of sounds like the person has a strong hand in their writing. Strong hand in a voice. So I would read on to the next pages to see what's at stake, and what's happening with Neva. I think it's Neva.
Yeah, that's awesome. Lesley?
Yeah, this one was really, really strong. As soon as you read that first sentence, I'm jotting down like great first sentence. I love that it gave you just enough for you to be like, what else is going to happen? And then it followed up with a fantastic opening paragraph. I really loved that description. I felt like it was really easy for the reader to really be able to put themselves in the story and be able to see. And I love the way that the writer went ahead and like kind of revealed more things. The talk about it's like a trade day and like people are going to be piling with hoarded rations and any goods that are worth their weight in food, because that little description tells you so much about like the people that are in this village. If they're trying to trade for food, they're not looking for money necessarily, like they're really just trying to get by. And I just really loved the way that Neva is like reciting the merchant's call, like the broken hymns in her head. And then right away it's like, but that's all a lie. That was just the perfect timing, I feel like, for that in the story, because it's like, okay, so it's a lie. So what's really going on in this village? this one I would definitely keep reading. It was really well done.
The only thing I would say, I'll just add, I would be curious to what makes it a fantasy. Because there's historical fiction, right?
Mm-hmm.
And people, different eras where people are, have to give up whatever metals or goods that they have for food, right? So what I would be reading to see what makes this a fantasy and not just historical fiction.
Yeah. In general, it's a good idea to just put it right out there in the first sentence or two, the genre, especially if you can combine it with your introduction with the characters or some kind of action. I would keep reading, but I just wanted to point out to writers out there that word choice is so important in setting a tone and mood, and that this author has paid very close attention to the words they pick. They just haven't picked a random synonym from a thesaurus. Namely, words like the bells ring, sound echoed, the bells clang through her bones, the cracked tooth, the clink of coin. It all gives this like hard but broken, vibrating kind of feel to the opening. I don't know how that's going to tie into the story, but it's kind of an interesting aspect for me. So well done by the writer.
Definitely. Yeah, I like what's happening here as far as Lesley mentioned, the pace at which the author is revealing new information. Like it's not just a blank slate landscape picture of what's happening. It's like you get little brushstrokes every sentence that add on to what's happening that make you go, oh, okay. Really cool. Awesome feedback. All right. Should we move on to the fourth? I lost count already. I don't know where we are. The next one.
We're on the
Should we
fourth
do
one?
the next one?
And
awesome.
I think my technical problems are fixed.
Yay!
I'm not going to say what it was, but it was a very boneheaded thing on my side. So I apologize to all the viewers.
The sacrifices worked. All right. We'll hope that it doesn't happen again. Our next entry is a science fiction entry. It does not specify the length, so I'm going to assume it's a short story until otherwise proven. It is science fiction, and there are some trigger warnings that I'm going to read right now. It looks like the trigger warnings include child harm, helplessness, mutilation, physical abuse, violence, and torture. So thank you for specifying for all of us today. The title of this entry is Body of Theseus. My mind is fractured like bullet-resistant glass that ate a magazine from an AK-47, but I can't afford to break. That's Sheree raising her hand. Do you want me to continue until the others raise their hands?
Yeah.
No, I'm out.
Okay. You got it, Sheree. Thank you. But I can't afford to break. The girl needs me. Ivan Kaloyan's surgical bots came for her this morning, repurposed security models made of military-grade steel, equipped with retractable surgical tools instead of weapons. All right, that's Jason. They sliced off her right arm just below the elbow. Didn't explain why. They never do. Perhaps they needed a tissue sample. Perhaps they wanted to see how she'd respond to pain. When the head surgeons lopped the girl's arm off, she slammed it into the nearest wall with her mind. She wasn't even conscious at the time. It took 3 more bots tag-teaming their efforts to successfully cauterize the wound before she bled out, and all of them left the room with either broken limbs or a dented chassis. I don't have the girl's gift, but they've cut on me too. Most of my waking existence has become a blur of surgical instruments. Needles filled with paralytics, since I've lost my sedative privileges, scalpels and forceps for prying me open, laparoscopic instruments slid into body cavities, enabling proper surgical precision, and Lesley's hand is up as well. So we'll go ahead and stop there. And whoever would like to start with the feedback, go ahead.
I tapped out early because the language in the first sentence was very labored. very, very labored. And I just knew I wasn't going to want to read whatever else was happening. So I would have moved right on from that submission. Let me see if I can go and pull it up. It's doing too much.
I was going to say, by labor, do you mean that it's trying to do too much at the same time?
It's doing too much. My mind fractured like bullet resistant glass that ate a magazine from an AK-47.
So simplification there would be beneficial.
I don't know what could help, but not that sentence.
Got it.
I think,
yeah,
maybe not perfect, but just cutting out that whole stuff about the glass and the magazine and the AK-47, just simply saying my mind fractured, but I can't afford to break. At least that asks the question, and it's a simple question: what is going on?
Mm-hmm.
Why are they trying not to break? I feel that's a lot cleaner and more effective than what was used.
Yeah, sometimes similes are not your friend. Sometimes they're like, you don't need the simile.
Yeah, particularly in the first couple lines.
I would agree that not in the first sentence, like, because you're opening it up and you're like, I do feel like it did create a visual for me. Like, we all, because of TV, we've all seen where bullet resistant glass has that like very cracked look. So I did get that image, and if that was the writer's goal, then for me it succeeded. But I kept, as I'm reading, and I hold off raising my hand for a while because I kept going, why? Like, why are they just like lopping this girl's arm off? And apparently she has some sort of like, you know, ability where she can send them flying across the room and all of this. And I just kept looking for that, like, why? Like, there is no hint. Is there some sort of like war going on where I'm assuming they're stealing body parts from people with abilities to be able to harness those abilities? But that's not clear, super clear. And I kept looking for a like why of what would the purpose of these doctors, robots coming in doing it. Like, is this like a robot war where the robots are harnessing the doctor?
I made it through the first couple of lines. I do find the premise to be kind of interesting, and for a second prior to Allie reading, I did kind of scan forward and saw that there was some interesting stuff going on. But by the time we get toward the end of that first paragraph, we've really been we've been given a lot of words, but we haven't been given any plot or characterization or anything that really made me want to grab onto the story and keep reading. So my advice to the writer would be to just maybe lop off, to use a word that they may enjoy, having written this, that first paragraph, maybe rework the intro a little more, get us into the character before you get us into the torture and the lopping and the pain and all that. So that way it hits the reader a little more in the chest.
Right.
I think the second paragraph could be a good opening. The second paragraph, if you start it, and also just put in the if you're going to do trigger warnings, instead of helplessness, I would just put body horror. So people will know, like, if people aren't into it, they can brace themselves, or if they're okay with it, they're fine. That lets them know right off. So then you start off with, when the head surgeon lopped the girl's arm off, she slammed it into the nearest wall with her mind. Okay, that's interesting. She wasn't even conscious at the time. It took 3 more bots tag teaming their efforts to successfully cauterize the wound before she bled out. And all of them left the room with either broken limbs or a dented chassis. I don't have the girl's gift, but they've cut on me too. Now I'm hooked. I'm intrigued. I want to read on. But that first paragraph, I don't think it really helped create excitement and interest in me as a reader, just because the language is kind of, I don't know, just felt labored. Whereas it seemed really simple and to the point and action oriented in the next paragraph.
Lesley, you had something?
No, I agree with Sheree. I think that taking off that first paragraph, like when Sheree just reread that now, I was like, oh, well, wait, that does. But I think that I got so bogged down in that first paragraph that it was hard to even focus on the good stuff in the second paragraph. So just taking that first paragraph off automatically makes it so much stronger. So I think that would be a good place to start.
Yeah. I think somebody said a minute ago that similes are not always your friend in the first paragraph. And it feels like as a reader that it's because it delays how quickly you settle into the story, because you're thinking about the simile instead of what's actually being given to you. So I guess my follow-up question, since this is a really interesting conundrum, is as a writer, how do you know when your first paragraph needs to get out and you can fast forward to the second or third paragraph? Like when you put so much time and effort into that first sentence, into that first simile, into that first description, is it a matter, do you think, as editors, is it a matter of getting feedback from someone else or reading it out loud to see what it feels like? Or do you have any suggestions on that?
I mean, getting feedback is always a good idea, but I think just doing what Sheree just did and reading it without that first paragraph, and then asking yourself, honestly, do you lose any of the story by not having that first paragraph there? Like, does it actually change the story? Because if you're not losing any of the story, then it's easy to just be like, okay, that was pretty filler that I loved.
Yeah, I read as a writer, I read my work aloud. As a editor, I read works that I'm interested in. I read that aloud as well. It helps me experience the story better. It also helps me if I'm going to give revision letters, helps me figure out what I need to tell them, reading it aloud. It helps me key into the parts where I check out of the story. And that's the parts that we don't want in the story. We want people to stay invested until they get to the end and feel whatever it is that you want them to feel when they read the last lines of your story, and have what they take away, whatever it is you want them to take away. When you find yourself saying perhaps, that's probably perhaps a sign that you don't need that part, because maybe that is for you, that's satisfying some part of you as a writer, but not necessarily helping the reader. There's a key thing in that first paragraph, the girl needs me. We don't get the answer of how the girl needs me yet. And maybe that there are pieces of that first paragraph that can be salvaged and brought back into the story later. But your goal, writers, with that first page is to make us care. For magazines that have readers, F&SF has readers, Apex has readers. I've been published by Apex before. It's very important that you hold that reader's interest so that they want to keep reading to the end and that they feel confident that you're going to deliver a good story to them. And so you want to call the parts that are not necessarily throat clearing, but they're a part of the story, but we don't need to get that information right away. So maybe I can get that it's Ivan's robots later, right? But right now, throwing that out for me in the beginning, it just kind of, it's more stuff that more purple suns and stuff that I'm trying to hold in my head than I need in that moment, right? So read it aloud, let it move and flow, and then pull out the parts that don't help it flow. And if they're like, if you just love the fractured glass AK-47 imagery, then put it somewhere else. Even though I'm like, why am I talking about AK-47s in a world that has surgical bots that can do all this and people who are telepaths and telekinetic and all that? Like, why do I need an AK-47? It sounds like having a musket in this world. You know what I mean?
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Interesting. Okay. We're going to move on to the next entry. This one does not have any trigger warnings, and it doesn't say the genre. So we're just going to dive right in. This entry is called A Formless Gray Life. Token, please. The glass building is so large and cavernous, the attendant's voice rings like a finger around a wine glass, so sharp it hurts. You shrug a shoulder to cradle your ear while you rummage in the pocket of your jeans. A childish reaction, but that's fitting now, isn't it? You hold out the cheap gold token in the cold air between you both. It looks out of place in this monochrome world. When they don't move, you dare a glance at the oily wisp of smoke that is the attendant's head, an ever-changing haze of faces watching you. Some faces you know, some you don't. With a barely discernible nod, they draw your attention to the black metal box on the pedestal in front of you. The same color metal, which holds together hundreds of irregularly shaped glass panes that make up this building. At the back wall, people sit in a long bench in silence. People covered in a liquid silver material that sticks to hands that cradle faces. It oozes between fingers, squeezed from drenched clothing as they hug themselves tight. You ask, who are they? The attendant jitters, their face plummeting through the smoke of their head to see behind them before returning with a new face. They couldn't find what they were looking for and must wait for the next train. You look over your shoulder. The train that you departed is well into the distance now. You are already forgetting how you got here. Feedback?
I quite enjoyed this. There certain the way that setting is used to generate the mood. You know, things are gray and monochrome and black. Smoke, which is also, you know, dark color usually. And a fairly intriguing way to end the introduction. You are already forgetting how you got here. That's pretty strong. It's a good way to lead into the next part of your story. The only thing that I wasn't a huge fan of is the dialogue leading the story. It's not enough for me to say, no, I don't want this work. And I may have a discussion with the writer to have them try to convince me it needs to stay, or maybe we can move it or something. I just feel like it just sticks out compared to the rest with all this really nice prose and description and scene setting. So, but I certainly think I would continue reading.
Sheree?
I have a mixed response to this. I think it's nicely written. I like the prose of it. Pet peeve of mine is second person.
I was gonna ask.
My readers know that, so I usually send those stories to other people who don't have as visceral response to it. And I have published some, but I just find it really pretentious a lot of times. Like, why is this in second person? Why? But beyond that, I just want to know what's happening. Like, why? And I would read on to see to see if there's more, if this is not just a flash fiction piece, but if there's more to the story. Why is this an afterlife situation? Or, you know, what's the line? The line that made me intrigued was a childish reaction, but that's fitting now, isn't it? What does that mean? So I would read on to find out, what does this mean? This person's in jeans, so it's not a world that's so foreign from where, you know, what I know right now necessarily. Unfortunately, I thought of Game of, not unfortunately, like I don't like it, but it made me think of the Faces part of Game of Thrones that was never really picked back up. And well, I guess it was. It was. It had an important place in some major action of the story. So I won't say that, but I was deeply curious about that. The God of the Many Faces. And so I'm like, is this a God of the Many Faces situation? Is this an afterlife? Do you get to go see your old self as a kid again? Do you get to relive some parts? What's this train? You know, so it's very kind of surrealistic in a way. So, but it's not something that I would go in with a lot of excitement, only just because I'm just like, false mystery in second person, get on with it. Like we're spending all this energy on the architecture, and I don't really care about the glass building. I want to know the purpose, you know. So
definitely. Lesley, did you have anything?
Yeah. Unlike Sheree, I love a good second POV point of view story if it's done really well. Because when they're done really well, they're just so delicious, but they're a very hard sell for me. Like I need it to just hit me just right. And I was almost ready to raise my hand as we're going through this thing until you get to the description of the people sitting on the long wall and, you know, along the wall, and they're like, who are they? And that grabbed me again. You said you were reminded of Game of Thrones, Sheree. For me, I was having that moment when Calvin Wallace and Meg and Charles Wallace Calvin and Meg go they're trying to find their father, and they're in the room where the people are waiting to be like re-educated. That was the vibe that I was getting, and I was like, ooh, don't give them that token because these are bad people. Like that was the fear I was having. But I think that that's kind of a good thing that it hit us both differently, but both in ways where we're like, okay, well, this feels familiar and interesting. How are you going to change it to make it new and exciting? So I definitely would have kept reading. I just maybe would say maybe shorten that beginning just slightly. Because like I said, until we got to these other people where it's more than just the attendant and the person giving them the token, I was starting to get just a little bit like, okay, move it along. But then you're describing the other people and I'm like, now I'm invested. Now I want to know what's going on. Now they're saying that, you know, their train's already gone and they can't remember why they're there. Like that grabbed me again. So I might suggest just shortening that beginning just slightly.
Yeah, I'm so curious. Do they want us to know, like, usually these stories, we get a sense of, do I want to get on this train? Am I being forced to get on this train? Or do I not? Or is this not the train? Or, like, what does it mean to have missed the train? Some trains you don't mind missing. If it's going to hell, you're good. You're like, all right. If it's going to purgatory, you're like, okay, I don't need this one. You know what I mean? So give us a sense of what does the narrator feels like. Do they want to be on this train or do they not want to be on the train? And why is it they recognize some faces from the attendant and not others? What are the faces they recognize?
Exactly.
That's what I'm curious. Like, who are they? You know, because that will help us understand a little bit more of the story. Again, it's that mystery. Like, how much mystery? That's the challenge of short stories. How much mystery do you need readers to have? What's fun for you as the writer, but what's going to be effective for the readers? You know what I mean? Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, no, those are all questions that I had while I was reading. I was like, all right, but who is it? What does it look like? Yeah, it's interesting because this is, I also would keep reading. I'm not an editor. We all know this. I'm not an editor, but I would keep reading. Yeah. But I think it's so interesting because, like with the last entry, even moving some of this information around in the order that it happens might help that flow faster. Like when you reach into the pocket of your jeans and then you notice the people on the bench and you're like, who are they? And then you pull out the token. Maybe that might help increase that mystery, but with a purpose that Sheree is asking for. I'm also always intrigued when it's so vague that it's specific. Like all of this is so vague on purpose, which makes it very specific, I feel like, texture wise, as a reader. So I'm interested to see where that would be going. Alrighty, the next entry is a fantasy and a horror. So we've got a little fantasy, a little horror in here. And the title is A Brew for Fighting Death. Immortality, it turns out, requires just 4 components. A shadow stolen beneath a waxing gibbous moon, a child's first wish, and 2 hearts, freshly cleaved and still drumming, distended with a dream unmet. Easy, all, mostly. She can even do it without hurting anyone, technically. She purses her lips over vats of steel and star glass and spits. That's the start of the hearts. Now she just needs the dream. Flesh buds and curdles beneath her voice, warmed by amniotic fluid and recitations of grimoires and syllabi. Lectures, incantations, poetics on neon sunsets and moon-rhymed sediment, recipes for roast and obedience, fossil auguries, and calipers fine enough to measure curses. There aren't enough hours to scrape even the rind off the universe's swollen spectrum of secrets, much less to pick her teeth of the pulp, to swallow every seed, to know it all. Her life's singular aspiration, shortened by life's shortness. In the vats, ribs and fine skin gossamer over hearts that flutter like scarlet nightingales, growing larger, large enough, and when she uncasks her components, she realizes her mistake. As soon as their flesh-soft souls smack the laboratory floor, they each grab a scalpel. So it looks like with that entry, we got a hand up from Lesley, we got a no from Sheree, but Jason, did you raise your hand at all?
I would have at the very end.
Okay. Let's have some feedback. Jason, do you want to go first since you didn't raise your hand yet?
Yeah. I guess I gave this one a little more leeway on the whole patience thing because I was enjoying some of the turns of phrases and some of the writing, the flexing that was going on with the writing. It was making some nice imagery. But a whole lot here is said and not a whole lot happens. And if you can make something happen in that first paragraph or 2, then you may have a story that will keep me reading beyond the first 250 words.
I am going to say that I did really enjoy that opening sentence because it's giving you very much a recipe for immortality. And if the goal of the story is for the narrator to achieve immortality, fantastic. Like, you've set us up and told us what it's going to be. But then it goes right into the second paragraph with easy, mostly. Well, first of all, it's a short sentence, but it's a little bit confusing. In that, like, the way that it reads doesn't flow. And also, as a reader, you're setting up in that first paragraph, like, okay, here's what we're going to do for immortality. And then right off the bat, you're like, oh, easy. Well, that's kind of a letdown as a reader because I'm going, well, I don't want it to be easy. Now, it looks by the end of it that it's not going to be as easy as she seems to think it's going to be. But I don't know that I would put right out there after you're going, like, instead of just saying easy, maybe just like leave that part off and start to tell us what the process is going to be. And also, like Jason said, there's an awful lot of words here, but not a whole lot of like story in those words. I felt like the sentences were overly long and complex, which a good long complex sentence every once in a while is great, but for the to be one right after the other, then makes it a lot of work on the reader to kind of parse your meaning and parse together what that sentence is actually saying. So I feel like if the writer would just kind of break some of that up so that it flows a little bit better, and so that it isn't so much work on the reader's part trying to figure out exactly what it's saying, that could be a good thing. I'm not saying you have to get rid of all of your long, complex sentences, not at all. Like, they're beautiful, and like Jason said, there's some beautiful turns of phrases, but break it up just a little bit so that your reader's not working so hard to figure out exactly what's going on. Those are my main takeaways.
Definitely. Sheree, what have you got?
I feel like it's overwrought. It's overwritten for a story. If it were a prose poem, I might have been a lot more generous with letting a lot of the kind of over the top phrasing and stuff go, because it's a prose poem, and there's room for me to ponder it and to revisit stanzas and think about it or what have you. But in terms of getting story sense, the story I thought I was getting is that this is a powerful person who, for reasons that have not yet been shared with us, they're trying to be immortal. And we have a little bit of some hint of that in the last paragraph that was shared. All her life's singular aspirations shortened by life shortness. I mean, just basically the fact that life is too short for some people, right? So she's got this spell to do it, but it goes kind of wrong. I think because in the end, she said, the narrator says that they realize the protagonist has made a mistake, and as soon as, I don't know what's happened, they conjured up somebody else. There's some other forces, but as soon as their little feet hit the ground, the lab floor, they grab a scalpel. So now they're in danger, I'm assuming. There are things that I didn't believe. I don't believe that it doesn't hurt anyone to take their beating hearts, their hearts. I don't believe that it doesn't hurt anyone to take the child's first dream. When we get the amniotic fluid, I'm like, okay, now we're dealing with dead babies. Or maybe, possibly, right? It's just a lot going on there. So some of the language is interesting, but then some of it like pulls me out, and it just seems like it's going to be a lot. And if we're getting, and it's like a lot of repetition. So I would have the writer go back, read it aloud, and call the things that are maybe 2 steps too far. Because some people like that 1 step too far, and that's fine. That's a stylistic thing, right? And it's great to have style, but maybe 2 steps too far. Like, do I need syllabi and lectures? Do I need grimoires and incantations? What does it mean to have poetics on neon sunsets? What are recipes for roast? Like literally roast the food and obedience? Like, what's happening here? It's a lot. And I think I'm going to read a whole short story of that. That's a lot.
Yeah, and I as a reader wonder too, like, if we're being brought into this particular story with so much like we were saying, poetic or like prose poem style language, and then we drop into some action right at the end of this entry, I kind of do wonder as a reader, like, does the rest of the story continue in that dreamy style, or does it shift out of it into something more action based, something more immediate? It's interesting, but I think, I would, it was fun to read out loud. I liked reading it out loud, just because you get to pull certain things out of certain sentences. But as a reader, readers may not necessarily slow down. And I read very fast when I'm reading in my head. And I don't always slow down long enough to pull the beauty out of each individual sentence because I want to know what's going on. But when I read it out loud, I get to sort of do both. So that's my thoughts on that. All right, let's have another one, since I think we're still rolling along with enough time to continue. This next entry is science fiction and horror. And I am not sure the length of the actual piece, but the entry is the same length as the other entries. And the title of this entry is Human Ivory. If the human wool fad had minted trillionaires, then surely human ivory was going to do the same. I intended to cash in when it did. Damned if I'd graduated summa cum laude in economics to continue paying slumlords by stocking supermarket shelves, then hawking my plasma and eggs. No way. So when facing new international laws which restricted DNA alteration, I traveled to one of the few countries allowing it, and the only one promoting it, Ecuador. Upon my arrival in Guayaquil, a man with a tusk shooting up from his lower jaw and wearing a silk Armani suit approached me. Using the Spanish pronunciation, he said, Angela? I tried not to shake. No one was supposed to meet me. Worse, I recognized him as Yorli Zurita, a notorious member of the ruling junta. I stammered out a correction to his pronunciation, then quickly added, Don't worry, my brown skin throws people off. He shrugged and motioned for me to follow. I hesitated. Certainly a return flight had a seat available. Would he let me leave? If not, could I escape later? He cast a menacing glare at me when I didn't move. That answered my first question. I hustled along as he led me to a luxurious flying car. It had golden doors and a stocked wine cooler. The leather crafter in me, however, focused on the peculiar and smooth leather interior. What kind of leather is this? I asked. Human, of course. Cherie?
Oh, I don't even know what to say. Reading in the portal can be such a hard thing sometimes, that you live for stories that make you smile and laugh. I thought it was an interesting idea. I definitely would have kept reading, just because you're like, how much wilder can this story get, right? I'm so very deeply curious. So we got a world where, people are getting very, very super rich from DNA modifications. Makes me think a little bit of maybe Blood Music, Greg Bear. But that was, what, 80s, late 80s, early 90s, a long time ago. The fact that this is happening in Ecuador is interesting. Maybe Costa Rica. I'm just thinking of all the less expensive cosmetic surgeries that's happening. So it's like a good effort at extrapolation. There is some humor, and I think it is intentional humor. I don't think it's unintentional in it. I ultimately probably wouldn't publish this for F&SF. Doesn't mean it wouldn't be able to get a home somewhere else. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Just because you pass them one place obviously doesn't mean that another editor might not think it's perfect for them. It seems a little bit bizarro esque in it. And the human leather creeped me out a lot. That really creeped me out, especially when I think about places like, well, I won't name the universities, but certain places that still have human books made from people, enslaved people. So we'll just leave it at that. So that was very dark and creepy. So I would keep reading. I will just say that, to see where they landed, what ends up happening to this aspiring trillionaire. Yeah.
Definitely. Jason?
I really enjoyed it, and this kind of reminded me of something that like Levi Tidhar would write. He's all about weird and mixed with humor and just kind of weird situations. Now, I don't know if I would buy this for the magazine. I may. Obviously I would have to read the rest, but so far a good start. So people ask me all the time, Apex, they do dark sci-fi. That means they don't do humor, and I'm always like, well, yeah, we love humor. It's just that we don't get very many dark stories that know how to use humor properly, and this author, I think, has that knack. So hopefully we'll see this sometime in our slush pile or published elsewhere. I think it's a fun story, and it's clever. So
definitely funny too. It's funny.
Yeah, I was going to say, before we go to Lesley, I was going to say La Vie Tidar was what came to mind as well, Jason, in reading this one.
Yeah.
I was like, oh yeah. But I think that one of the things that makes that work, the humor and the weirdness of the situation, is how grounded it is in its own reality. That what's happening here with human leather and human wool and DNA alteration, it feels... And tusks, yeah. And it feels so immediately like, whoa, like alarm bells are going off, but it's so grounded in its own reality that like,
yeah,
you have to take it seriously.
A lot of Lavi's work is like that. Totally weird shit is happening, but he presents it as just completely normal. Like, yeah, this is the way it is now. There's people with Armani suits on with giant tusks. So
yeah.
I would not be surprised if he submitted this, to be honest. He jokes through that way.
Lesley, did you have any feedback?
Yeah, I really enjoyed that first paragraph and how it immediately gave us so much information about our narrator. Because the fact that you have a world where people are still obviously getting into lots of student loan debt. She's talking about graduating in economics and then having to stock shelves and selling blood, plasma and eggs. And so I'm like, that immediately tells us what kind of person our main character is. So I thought that was really well done. And I also like so you're going human wool. Okay. You can take human wool without killing people, right? Human ivory, I'm figuring we could figure out how to get ivory without killing the people. But then you're reading along and you're introduced to this, very slick character in the Armani suit with the tusk and his obvious riches. And you get to the human leather. Well, not quite sure that we can harvest human leather without killing the people, which I think shifts this story into a much darker place, and I definitely really liked that. I liked the way that was kind of like thrown in there at the end, and you're like, oh shit, people aren't like growing the ivory and then having it harvested to make money like she would the plasma or the eggs. Like, you're donating that of your own body. You can't get human leather. So now I'm going, are we going to have like human farms? Is that where she's being taken? Like, is she going to be human, on a farm to be farmed out for different pieces? I think that there's a lot of interesting places that this could go. And I like the way that those bizarre concepts were introduced in a way that it's like, okay, wool, definitely easy to harvest wool. We harvest wool from sheep. The sheep are fine. They're happy sheep, I like the way that it was introduced in like a way that's like the least harmful down to like the most harmful. So I thought that was very well done, and I really liked that part.
Definitely a polarizing situation to be in, I think. Definitely would read the rest of that story.
Yeah, and I'm wanting to know, like, how does Mr. Armani's suit, how did they know she was getting off of that flight? And who is she that they would care?
Mm-hmm.
right? Like there's
Yeah.
lots of interesting questions that come up. Like, you know, somebody's got to think that she's important to put her on the radar of the guy in the Armani suit. Because he's obviously very important. So he's not going to come himself unless somebody thinks she's important. So who is that? There's a lot of very intriguing questions that are brought up in this short beginning that makes me want to keep reading.
Definitely. All right, we're going to hit the next story entry. This is another horror, and the title is The Exorcism of Silent Grove. The path through the forest is quiet. My horses neigh and tug at their reins. Other than them and the wheels of the iron-plated carriage digging ruts into the desecrated earth, there's no more than a slight breeze ruffling the leaves. No birds or other animals as far as I can tell. It's as silent as the village's name promises. Is it like that now because the demon has been set free, or was its influence always so strong that it drove off the woodland creatures? Maybe this could have been avoided if people hadn't settled here, if they had seen the signs. I pass the first wooden homes and hear a low moan, followed by ragged breaths and scrambling feet through the mud. I see two, afflicted, rushing toward me. Their extremities shift and jerk unnaturally, yet they come ever closer. They let out howls of pain in one moment, and in the next, their faces twist into grotesque smiles. The silver cross lies heavy on my chest. The scars on my back tingle, and my heart goes out to those poor souls, but I cannot help them. Not yet. Before they get too close, I pull out a much bigger and heavier cross of solid gold from the bag at my side. It's a thing of beauty, intricate scrollwork engraved along the metal. Its range is powerful, and it keeps me safe. Stay back! I raise the cross up high with both hands. Okay, so we had both Lesley and Sheree right at the end with the hands up. Jason? Did you raise your hand,
Explain myself. Okay. I wasn't exactly blown away by this opening, but I also wasn't like ready to just give up on it immediately. The writing is fine enough. I do feel like the opening paragraph goes on a little too long. I know we're harping on this all the time, but you really need to get us something in the first few lines that will tie us to the story, and then you can worry about setting the scene and creating the mood and filling in stuff that I would consider backstory. Perhaps the biggest thing that would keep me from continuing is it feels kind of familiar. And that's always a danger when you're dealing with fiction that contains like some kind of monster or like dark magic. I mean, they're well-worn tropes. And there's not necessarily anything in here that makes it stand out other than the suggestion that this person may be an escaped convict or slave because they have the tingling scars. So yeah, just it definitely needs to be something more distinctive needs to happen in this opening.
Lesley?
I love horror, so let me just put that out there first. But even when you read the title, The Exorcism of Silent Grove, there was a part of me that was just like, ugh, like, because like Jason said, it's familiar, like it's very familiar. And we're reading this, and I felt like I was dropped into 100 horror movies that I've read before. And I was hoping maybe that we would get something different. And maybe later in the story, the author has a twist that makes this different. But from somebody who is a huge horror fan, who has watched a lot of horror movies, especially like there's so many of those, like the Exorcism of whatever, I went into it with just this like heavy feeling of like, I know what this is. And there was nothing that was given to me, not even a little scrap, that made me feel like the author was going to prove me wrong. And maybe the purpose of the author wanted was to set up a very familiar horror trope and then twist it, which would be fantastic. I would love to see that. But you're going to have to give, like Jason said, the writing's fine. When an editor says the writing's fine, that isn't like a shining, glowing thumbs up. That just, it's fine. You need to either have the writing be so exciting and so engaging that I'm willing to put up with a familiar story, or you need to give me some little glimmer that this story is not going to be the same story that I've watched and read 100 times before. And this didn't do either of those for me. I just felt like we were beginning a horror movie that I have seen, something that I would put on TV because I need something that is familiar in the background while I do something else. And that's, as a writer, that's not what you want. Like, you don't want it to feel like a comfy blanket story where the horror person's like, oh yeah, I know what's going on. So I would say that either the writing really needs to be vamped up to where I can't let go, even though I feel like it's so beautiful and so well written that I'm like, I will go along with the familiar because I want to be in these words. Or give me some sort of hope that you're going to give me something that what you're giving me at the beginning is not how it's going to end, because I just feel like this is so familiar that anyone who really reads or watches a lot of horror is immediately going to check out.
Yeah, definitely. Sheree.
Hey, horror fan here. I really enjoy horror. I'm publishing more horror in F&SF. So I might have noticed. One thing that you can do as a writer is to read your story and highlight the things that make the story really unique. The things that really, I call it the shiny moments. What are the shiny moments in the story? Sometimes that can be the prose. Sometimes it can be character development that you've done. It's really unique and interesting. Sometimes it could be the setting and the world building. Sometimes it's the dialogue. What is it that makes this story stand out? A lot of passes are because the stories don't stand out in a way that will demand that I publish them or keep them in my acquisition pile to publish later, right? I can only publish 6 books a year for F&SF. Every other month, there's, a 256 page, 58 page, issue that comes out. And that's 6 to a dozen stories with all the art, reviews, columns, nonfiction, etc. That's in there. So I have to be very discerning about what I'm going to decide to publish. And I can't publish stories that are just fine. I can't publish stories that are okay, or even stories that are super, super familiar without you having your unique, fresh take on it as a writer. as an author, as a person who lives on the planet and has a unique point of view. Okay. So if you're going to give me an exorcism story, and we've already got the best exorcism ever, still the best exorcism story is The Exorcist, right? In my opinion. Even with all the exorcisms of Emily Rose and the exorcism of and all these other stories, it's still the best. You're going to have to come hard. And for me, out of all of these paragraphs, the only thing that was shiny for me is the scars on my back tingle. And this setting, that's unusual. Why are there scars on this person's back? Who is this person? Why are they riding this horse? I'm assuming they're going to be the person that's going to exercise them. But then they say, well, I can't help them, at least not yet. Like, so what's going on there? There's things that should make me want to read on, but because the first few paragraphs were so flat, not in terms of the writing per se, the sentences are good sentences. They're just not interesting. We've got a generic Western town, generic person on a horse, the cliche scene of no animals and birds twittering, so that means evil's around. We know that. You've got the wooden homes, even the afflicted come and they don't have anything unique about them. And the heavy cross. All of that is standard fare. So what makes the story stand out? Nothing very much right now other than the scars on the back. So this would be something I would have to pass on because it's just not getting me interested in what's going to happen. You're going to bring us women with short swords and dragons and the witch and the all the classical things that we love in our genre. You're going to have to bring something unique and fresh to it. And you got to start it off right away. Guys, you don't have all day. You don't have all day in a short story. That first page has to be fire. I don't know how to say it. The first page has to be fire. It has to get us there. It has to demand that we scroll down or we flip the page or that we download it or whatever it is that we do with the stories that we want to spend time with. You have to bring it to us on the first page. You don't get more than that. You don't get more than that. You don't get more than that. That first page has to sing. So if you've written a 20-page story and you only have 3 highlights on that on that manuscript that are actually unique things and the rest of it is filler, that's the stuff we're going to skim. That's the stuff we're skimming. So give me some eyeball kicks, give me some shiny stuff, bring it.
I think that's really the feedback in a nutshell, right? Yeah.
That first page got to be fire. I love it. That's so true.
Yeah, I feel like people are just like, this is not your writing group. And I was trying to explain this to someone. They were inviting me to come to something. And I'm like, I have taught a lot of different groups, groups I've taught actually in schools in New York City. And I've also, taught at graduate programs and I've, done all those things. The thing about it is editing is not the same as teaching. And we're not your workshop leaders. When you're sending us your story, we're not your workshop leader. We're not your friends. We're not your mama. We're not your spouse or whatever. We're not your cheerleaders necessarily. Our job is to find publishable stories that are fire. Publishable stories that stand up to the work we've already published and the work that we hope to publish. And your work has to stand well next to veterans and also other new emerging exciting voices. And so that's very demanding. And you have to compete with all the things, that we're watching. I just watched Nope. I just went to the theater to see that. I saw The Black Phone. I went back and read the novelette, to see what was different, how they adapted into this new medium. Just written my first novel in the Black Panther universe. Just, the whole classic art, the original comics for the Black Panther, reimagine them for, 21st century. So there's a lot of competing things. We've got, my husband's a gamer. We have all these things, right? Your story has to compete with all these other things out in addition to actual people that we love and care about. And that first page has to be on fire. It has to be that, tell me a story. And I want to zoom in and hear the story that you're telling me. And if it's just like, Do-do-do-do-do. Dude on the horse. Here come some things. We can't see them, but here they come. I got my cross. I'm not going to save you. Not yet. Like, what? Like, retell. You know what? Read your story out loud and read it as if your haters are reading it.
Ooh.
Read your story as if somebody who is not your friend, who does not want to see your dreams come true, who doesn't want to, doesn't care about you, is reading your story. Read that first page with that lack of generosity and compassion, and then go back and edit it. If your worst critic, because often writers are their worst critics. We are the worst critics of our work. Like we're hard on our work, right? Read it in an unsympathetic way and go back and write it again. Because you don't get more than that first page, baby. Some people here tonight didn't even get more than a sentence. Right? Even though maybe page 15 might have been fire. And that writer had to, write up to get to that awesome part. But you don't have that chance when you're in the portal, in the slush pile, or the transom, whatever you want to call it. You do not get that luxury. So keep that in mind when you're writing these stories and you're sending them out. Make sure that first page is fire. Who, what, when, where, why. And the main why is, why do I care?
Yeah, that is the big one.
Yeah, and that was sort of the baseline the last time we did a Snap Judgement as well. It's, why do I care? Why is it different? Why now? That was beautifully said, Sheree. Absolutely. We are technically at time. So I am going to wrap us up, but I just have to say that was the best, I think, critique feedback that we could go out on. I think that, I'm jazzed up. I'm going to go write something after this. I don't know about you guys.
I don't want to follow that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But I just want to say thank you to everyone who has tuned in, joining us for Snap Judgment number 4. I really hope that this discussion and this discourse has been useful and entertaining, even despite our many technical snafus and hurdles. On behalf of Apex Magazine, we want to thank all the writers who submitted their work for review this time around.
Brave writers.
Incredibly brave. And we are so grateful for these submissions, because otherwise we wouldn't have anything to talk about. We would just be giving you advice in a vacuum, and that's not useful to anybody. So thank you for your submissions, writers, and Godspeed. After going through this. If we didn't get to your submission again, I am so sorry. One of the best parts about doing Snap Judgment is getting that real-time feedback and getting the discussion around the feedback. I think if I'm estimating correctly, we got about a little over halfway through the submissions that we have. So if we didn't get to yours, I apologize, but I thank you for your patience and thank you for submitting them, so that we would have this lovely panel to discuss. Thank you, Lesley. Thank you, Jason. Thank you so much, Sheree Renée Thomas, who you can find over at the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction, and checking out her many glorious accomplishments and books, both as a writer and as an editor. That's so exciting. And thank you so much for being here. We're all very happy that you were able to join us.
Thank you. Thank you. We love Apex.
Yay.
Thank you.
If you love Apex and you want to see Apex do more of these kinds of events for readers and writers, do not forget to subscribe to the magazine. Head over to apex-magazine.com for subscription and backing information. We're also on Patreon. It's patreon.com/apexbookcompany. If I remember correctly.
Correct.
Yeah, I'm getting the nod. Okay. And please, if you can, please consider supporting the 2023 Apex Magazine Kickstarter, which is live right now. You can go to Kickstarter right now and find Apex Magazine and support us for 2023. And if you're watching the live stream on YouTube right now, it should be linked in the chat. And if not, it's all over our Twitter. And
it's linked in the description of the video.
Linked in the description of the video. That is a good place to link it. Snap Judgment number 5, the next edition, is planned for the nebulous time of the end of 2022. We will have dates and guest editor information forthcoming. But for now, Sheree, where can people find you online if they want to follow your exploits?
Oh, they should follow the magazine at on Twitter at FANDSF. Yep, and I'm at Black Pot Mojo.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you again, Sheree, for joining us. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Lesley. Thank you, Apex team, for making this live stream possible. Thank you for tuning in and for submitting your work, writers. Good luck, keep writing, and we will see you at the next Snap Judgment.